Thank you, everyone, for joining us for debunking the myths around advisory services. My name is David Evans. I am Vice President of Sales for Pacific Accounting and Business Services, and I will be moderating our expert panel today, where we have Jim Buffington and Jason Stein from Intuit and John View from Pacific Accounting and Business Services. And Jim, why don't you start us off on introductions, then we'll go to Jason, and then John, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Yeah, thank you, David. Always a pleasure to be invited here and partner with you. And I lead advisory services here at Intuit Accountants, which means I get to spend a lot of time with firms, learning best practices and sharing those out with the industry. And my purpose is really all about helping our profession lead with advisory services, really to power prosperity for your clients, for your team, and for firm owners. I've been at Intuit for 20 years. Before that, I grew up in public accounting for about a dozen years. So don't do the math. And yeah, very happy to be here. Thank you, David.
Thanks. Jason?
Yeah, honored to be here as well, David. Thanks for including us. As you mentioned, I'm Jason Stein. I lead training and education for the tax and accounting profession here at Intuit. I work a lot with Jim, actually. We have some article bylines published in various trades. I'm a thought leader and host of our podcast we launched last year called Account Trends, where I have the wonderful honor to meet with all kinds of experts across the profession and dig into the important trends that are affecting our work and the way forward. And a lot of that conversation is around the advisory, the hot topic of the last 25 years that I've been in the profession, and continues to be, and I'm loving that we're seeing it even more prevalent now. So I'm particularly excited about this topic that we have today.
Yeah, thank you so much. John?
Thanks for everyone participating today. I've been doing this a long time, 36 years, the last 22 years around the tax accounting and the outsourcing side of it. I spent about 9.5 years at Intuit in the professional tax and accounting division, working with both Jason and my next door neighbor for almost 9.5 years was Jim Buffington. So pretty well versed on the tax and accounting side also.
Thank you all. And for our audience out there, we have some questions to get our expert panel started here today, but you can use the chat feature in GoToWebinar, depending on how you're got it set up. It's either on the right or the left, but just type your questions in there and we'll get to as many as we can before the end of our time here. And if we don't get to your question before we end, we will respond to it via email after the webinar. Jim, I'm going to start off with you. As I think Jason mentioned in the introductions, advisory services has been something that prominent influencers and associations have been warning firms about for quite some time now, and their need to move from compliance to advisory services. Yet many firms have not heeded that warning and are still predominantly delivering compliance to their clients. So why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, so there's probably several really good reasons, David. What we find is our traditional firms tend to be overwhelmed with compliance work. It's very deadline driven, kind of reactive, tend to be looking in that rear view mirror, and haven't necessarily updated their processes to lead with those advisory services, which tends to be more proactive, tends to be more focused on aligning goals of the clients with strategies that can help them reach those goals. Again, there's plenty of compliance work out there, and I think in the last couple years, it's getting even more challenging for firms to be strategic and not just be an employee in their firm and kind of get wrapped up in all that work, because the staffing shortage or our staffing challenges is really a double whammy. So we don't have enough staff to do all the compliance work that's out there. There's way more work than we have people in our profession to do. And so that actually creates more burden on the current teams. They're overworked, and that leads to more burnout and more capacity challenges. So one great opportunity is to begin to think strategically about your practice and begin to update those processes, update those services. John Maxwell likes to say that change happens, growth is optional. We want to help firms disrupt themselves so that they don't get disrupted by other things. Sometimes that's competitors, sometimes that's health issues. Too many of our firm owners are overworked, overburdened, underappreciated, undervalued. And so this is a great opportunity to move from those traditional compliance services to update their practice to lead with advisory.
Yep. Thank you so much. Jason, why are firms still struggling with making the transformation to advisory?
Yeah, I think Jim hit a lot of really important points. It's hard to think of what are the other things. The stuff that comes to mind for me, what I see and hear and talking with many of the firms out there's no like major burning platform, as we would call it in the corporate world, right? Where something is a threat pushing us, right? What Jim talked about is this abundance of work that has always been the case, and we've been operating in this profession for pretty much the same way, barring the introduction of computers and maybe transition from DOS to Windows. We've been doing the same work for a century, multiple centuries, and it's always been this looking back kind of compliance, making sure things are clean. And I think that people are so accustomed to having the right answer. That's what our work is at the end of the day. It's numbers on a form, and it's either correct or it's not. And the thing that I think people struggle with a lot is this is a much more ambiguous space, and transitioning the focus and the work from getting the numbers on there to having strategic conversations with clients, that's a whole different thing. And I hear people feel like they're not as confident to do that kind of thing. Then I also think that Jim mentioned the talent, and I think it's even bigger than that, because you get what you measure. And too many of our firms, we measure success by the number of tax returns we pump out each season. And we need to really be taking a step back, thinking strategically about the firms themselves, and then, designing our measurements around what's really the outcome, which is client growth, or the, things around those areas that are helping them to get to a place where they're achieving their goals and dreams, instead of filing tax returns that nobody really wants to have to do to begin with.
Yeah, great point. John, anything you would add?
No, I like what both Jim and Jason said. I think the only thing just to maybe build on a little bit is I agree with Jason. The metrics have always been around, number of bookkeeping clients, number of tax returns done, versus really looking at, am I adding value to my customers, and can I have those value added conversations? And I think if you would ask anybody, if you ask them about advisory services and what does it mean, could you double your revenue? I mean, most people would say, I'd love to do that. I just don't know how, right? And I think that's where that, I'll call it that roadblock, or that mental roadblock, comes into play, that we can have some further dialogue as we get into some of the other questions.
Got it. All right. Well, we'll stay with you, John, because I think you all already kind of touched on it a little bit. I think there's different definitions of advisory services out there and what people think about it. What's your definition?
So, there's many acronyms that have been thrown around over the last probably 20 years, CAS and advisory services, and 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. At the end of the day, I think advisory services is really adding, what Jim said, instead of looking in the rearview mirror doing compliance work, it's really about looking through the windshield and starting to help those customers with the future thinking things that might benefit their customers, such as, on the tax side, as far as advising them on, tax strategies and so on and so forth. On the accounting side, it's about being able to help them. Hey, if you impact revenue by 3% and reduced, expenses by 2%, what does that mean to your company, right? And I think the biggest challenge around advisory services is it's a term that gets thrown around, and most firms are just struggling with where to start, right? Where's that jumping in point, right, of jumping in? So when you talk about advisory services, it's really about adding value and moving upstream, and it's a different level of pricing. And you hear fractional CFOs say it's CFO for hire, when I really consider it around those small business owners and the tax customers, really helping them put more money in their pockets.
Yep, great. Jim, what's your definition of advisory services?
Yeah, I think John touched on a lot of them. Let me get very narrow and talk about tax advisory services, because I think it's easier for people for our profession to get their head around. Number one, it begins with understanding and aligning with the client goals, which is different than where we start with most of our traditional tax planning. We tend to start with last year's tax return and then kind of work from there. We still do compliance work. We still do tax preparation, tax projections, but instead of focusing on the compliance value, in other words, the tax liability, it's about recommending proactive tax saving strategies to clients and then helping them implement those and communicating the tax savings associated to each strategy. And the difference between firms that lead with advisory and firms that lead with compliance are the traditional firms that lead with compliance just do volume, volume, volume. They're generalist firms. The firms who lead with tax advisory, their clients can name a number about how much that firm saved them last year, and maybe over the last several years. And those advisory firms tend to become more specialized, a little bit more niche focused, because they find their passion about what they love to do, whether that's real estate or manufacturing or restaurants or whatever it is, and they lean in there and they become experts for those clients. Not just the generalists that the traditional firms are. They begin to speak the language of construction. They begin to speak, in terms of these great strategies that they just really love and really enjoy applying with their client base. And they become known as experts in there. And that's what this is all about. Our profession, everybody in our profession has such deep financial acumen, but so many of them don't have the opportunity to really demonstrate and showcase that financial acumen. And your clients need it. They absolutely want it, willing to pay for it, need it. And these firms that are leading with advisory are proving that. So I got a little narrow on the tax advisory, but once we get there, the same applies to business advisory, starting with those client goals, making sure that we're tracking towards those. And we're always looking forward and aligned with the client and their perspective.
Yep. Well done. Well done. Jason, in your opinion, what's the consequences of not making this shift for firms?
Yeah, and I also, that last question too is just really powerful, and I don't want to linger on it too much, but people think that they're doing it. If I go ask most firms today, are you doing advisory? They'll say yes. And then you start peeling the layers back and you start asking questions like, okay, well, how much are you charging for those advisory services? And they say, well, I give advice when I'm meeting with the client to go over their books, to look at the balance sheet and the P&L or the tax return or whatever that looks like. And then, the reality then isn't apparent to them that you're actually not offering advisory services. You're giving away free advice. And by the way, while you're going over the balance sheet and the P&L, the clients don't know how to read and frankly don't even really care about. What they care about most is what you have to offer in terms of your experience and your expertise, starting with the financials as a starting point. So it's a forward-looking thing. And so that's the hurdle that people just can't get over. And so come back to the question for me, David, because I feel like it was
No,
rolling into it, but
you were rolling right into it. And so, what are the
consequences.
consequences of not making that shift?
Right. So yeah, I mean, you're going to get left behind. That's where you're going to end up, because the as we continue to automate compliance work, that work, it just becomes, less and less valuable to clients. It's not that the work isn't important, right? I want to be careful about that, because there's never going to, the work is never going to go away. But you'll continue to find that, clients argue with you over the bill. They don't want to pay for these, services, and they're constantly comparing you to, as a commodity, if you will, instead of really seeing what your real worth is. And so, I think worst case scenario too, the firms that just continue to operate the way that they are, they're never going to grow. They're just going to be hard, continually more difficult to find talent, because the talent coming into our profession, what little talent there is coming into our profession, doesn't want to work the same way that we did, many years. They're not attracted to 80-hour work weeks. They're not attracted to data entry work. They want to have a meaningful impact on people's lives, and do work that creates value. And so I think that's kind of the biggest consequence, is just the missed opportunity and the continual erosion of the way that we've been doing things. It's going to leave firms with less and less valuable practices.
Good point. John, what would you add on the consequences?
Yeah, I think, kind of playing off what Jason just said, I think it's, I talk to 10, 15 firms a week, and I think the biggest, issue around that is, I think Jim mentioned it earlier, is the health. They're working, 80 to 100 hours. They can't find staff. They're turning customers away. They're not able to meet the needs of their existing customers. And exactly what Jason said, it's commoditized. I mean, if I can go and get the same work done somewhere over here and save 30%, I'm going to do it, right? So it's about what value do you bring to those customers if you don't make that change, and you're just going to be doing the same work over and over again. Like Jason, it's important work. Don't get me wrong. And I hear it all the time that they want to grow the business, they want to move to advisory services, but they've got all this compliance work. I don't know how to make that leap to advisory services, and that's the consequence, right? You keep pushing it off, and we're 5 to 7 years down the road, and we're still pushing it off, and you're going to get left behind is the biggest thing, I think. And as you think about your practice and your legacy that you want to bring to the table, and make sure you impact, because I think most accountants and most tax advisors really have that servitude mentality that they want to take care of their customers at the end of the day. And it's tough to take care of customers when you're backlogged and you're just doing the compliance work. And moving away from that compliance to advisor is really that leap of faith that you've got to just do it. And ultimately, you don't want to be left behind.
Yeah,
Right.
I would also just add that this journey takes time. It's a launch and learn, and we as practitioners, we practice on our customers. The longer you wait to start, the longer it's going to take to get there. And we've touched on a couple of things, but staffing, the young people, we want to make this a profession. The young people want to come in and grow their career and make a difference with clients. And now is the time. We got the tools, we've got remote work, we have great young people who are excited to make a difference with clients. And this is a great opportunity to transform our profession to where it's exciting if we align with those advisory services, because these younger career folks want to make that difference with clients. So if you make that switch, you're going to have a competitive advantage attracting great talent and retaining them and developing them. That's going to help you excel at what you do. The other thing we kind of swirled around that a little bit is updating a business model. We're accountants. We the business model drives the services that we do. As long as we keep writing on an invoice, you know, charging for a 1040, charging for a tax return, sales tax return, for compliance services, and we keep tracking hours and we keep billing in the same way we've done it for the last 50 years, we'll keep getting the same outcomes. Changing your billing model can drive the change in your practice. Firms that today are on subscription models with recurring revenue with scalable services, that means you have great financial acumen and you can scale that out to hundreds of clients instead of hours, which are finite and limited. If you got those subscription models and scalable services, your firm value is worth way more than one times revenue. If you have a traditional compliance model that's still billing by report, billing by the hour, reliant on, you know, those staff members to do a ton of work, and by the way, those wages keep going higher, the value of your firm is not going up, it's going down. Nobody is looking to buy those firms. So thinking about, you know, the direction you're going, it takes time. It's not all going to happen at once. The firms that keep waiting for everything to be in place and it to be perfect, basically spin and churn. The ones who are successful, the ones who have crossed the chasm, they launch and learn. They take that first step. They begin down this journey. And, you know, a year, 18 months, 2 years down the road, they wake up and they're like, wow, I finally have this firm of my dreams. My hours and my team's hours are going down. We're not working around deadlines anymore. We're delivering way more value for clients. Revenue's higher. Everybody's happier.
Yeah.
That was a lot there.
Yeah, all good, all good. And it was a great transition. John, I'll start with you on this one. So share some of what you've seen with the firms who have at least started or made this transition to advisory services. What are some of the best practices you observed?
So I think just a couple, you know, as far as best practices, one of the things that I've seen is, you know, when we're working with accounting firms, especially, you know, I'll start there, is, you know, prior to, you know, being able to do like, and as an example, a white label outsourced service, they had to do all the work themselves. And what we've seen in best practices is it's really that change management and how do you help your teams go through that change management instead of doing the work, having other people do the work, and you're monitoring that work, and you're having an uplifting the conversation to a different level, and you're an industry expert with that small business owner, and you know, it's a lead accountant, lead bookkeeper, whatever you want to call it, but they're having a different level of conversation with those small business owners than they were before, versus we just got to get the books to them by the, you know, 10th of the month and with the complete financial statements, and half the time they don't know how to read, you know, a P&L, and we're trying to help them understand, you know, how well they're really doing. And I think two is, you know, leveraging technology. We're going to get into that in here a little bit, but leveraging technology is a huge you know, best practice that it gives them a jumping off point to really have different levels of conversation by leveraging and automating and so on and so forth. And that can be with, you know, workflow, that can be with you know, reconciliations, that can be with, I mean, you've got to, I mean, the technology platform that's changed over the last 22 years has been night and day difference. I mean, it really has. And it allows the firm to really take it to a different level where you don't need as many people to do the same amount of work, but you also want to really focus on what those internal teams can do and how they do that starting off point and move forward with advisory. And the same thing that, you know, Jim could probably talk about on the tax side, right? I mean, it's not just churning out you know, 1040s and, you know, business returns and trying to get through those. It's about having different levels of conversation with them. And, you know, technology plays a big part across the board in this. And, you know, from, you know, the old QuickBooks desktop to QuickBooks Online, I mean, it's a shift in mindset. And, you know, there's still a lot of people that are on that. And, you know, kind of going back to what Jason said earlier, I talked to firms saying we've moved extensively to the cloud, and then when you start having conversations with them, they've got 100 people on the cloud that are new that they put on, but the 500 they had that are on QuickBooks Desktop, they still haven't migrated over, right? So I mean, it's those types of things that are really important to help push to the automation technology and really leveraging those best practices around that also.
Yep. Jason, I'm going to flip it to you, and I'm going to add and do an add +1 on what John just said, because that he read my next question. And so you have best practices, and you have technology is one of those best practices. So interested in your opinion on that. But then kind of get into how firms are using technology and what kind of how can they use it more.
Yeah, you read my mind, Dave, because as John was talking, I'm like, oh, I would love to build on this. And I'll add one other thing, not directly related to technology, but Jim called it out earlier. It was a very important point. Start somewhere. Just get one client. The ones that I have seen that I've watched go from not doing advisory at all to like, oh, it becomes a tidal wave at some point. It's really magical to watch. But they start with one client. And that's how you get going, right? So forget restructuring, forget all the big stuff, because this is an overwhelming topic for people. When they start thinking about leading with advisory, we use the words transformation to advisory, right? Those are scary things. Just pick one. You know that client, you have the client that you can start this with. And then you keep working on the rest of your firm. And then we come back to technology, right? It's so important. It's such a powerful force in our society today. But then even in our profession, the things that technology can do now, I mean, I could have never imagined the stuff that we can accomplish with technology today when I was starting in the profession 20 years ago. The biggest thing that I'll say that happens with technology, and it sort of ties back to my point earlier, like we just keep doing what we've always done. And John, you made a point about, half your clients are in the cloud, half of them are still on the desktop, but it's hosted or whatever. And I mean, all that's fine. But the thing that I don't think people quite realize is that, especially when we're talking about cloud technology, the cloud technology is designed with a different workflow in mind. And I constantly see people trying to take cloud technology and then jam it into their legacy workflows, and it doesn't work, and they get frustrated, and they end up hating the software when really the software is great. It's doing what it's supposed to do, but you've got to learn how it's designed to be leveraged, because cloud technology automates not just a single task, it automates a series of tasks. And if you can understand how it does that, then you can leverage it in the right ways, and you'll find that you're actually not frustrated with the technology. You're able to take advantage of it so that you can automate and create the space for innovation within your firm, create the space for change, right? And continue to lean into the future and the forward looking, instead of looking back and saying, this is how we've always done it. Here's a new technology, let me try and plug it in. It doesn't work. And then you get disheartened by the whole process too. And so then you feel like you just kind of keep going back to basics. So my number one thing with technology that I would share with people is, and coming from the education leader at Intuit, right? I see it a lot. Take the training that's offered with the software. Spend the time to really learn how to use it, how it's designed. You will find that it's much more powerful than even on the surface. And that goes for a lot of technology solutions. I'm not just talking about Intuit's.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jim?
And just to kind of build on that, so education is so important. If you really want to improve your firm, get involved in your community. Listen to those thought leaders that are out there sharing best practices. Jason's podcast, Accountant Trends, has tons of great thought leaders that are recommending, best practices that have already been tried and true. What we find is the biggest challenge is that John touched on a little bit about that mindset. It's that paradigm shift of the traditional way of doing things maybe the traditional technology, the traditional programs that we've used, to trying something new. That once you get past the paradigm shift, the rest of it kind of flows a little easier. Then it's just figuring out the process. And as accountants and tax professionals, we're great at figuring out complex problems. We're great at designing amazing processes. But trying to get through that paradigm, education, thought leadership, get involved in those communities, because your peers have already solved this stuff. They've already figured out amazing ways to run their firm. And Jason and I get the privilege of just seeing some amazing firms. I remember this was like 7 years ago when one of my tax council members, who had migrated all of her doctor clients to the cloud, they specialized in doctor medical practices, to the cloud. They were doing all of their accounting things monthly, began to close the books. Their meetings moved from talking about getting stuff together to finish the books to focusing on client goals, focusing on forward, looking at profit, looking at tax saving strategies. I remember the first year that they had them all up there and they finished every business return by March the 15th. And I remember we celebrated because that had never happened in the history. I've been doing this a long time. In the history of our profession, we had never done that. Finished all of them, a couple hundred, before the business deadline. When I asked our tax council this year how things were going, how they were doing, the vast majority of them had finished all of their business clients by January 31st. January 31st. So when you want to see the value of moving to the platform, moving to the cloud, updating your practice, those are the realities. It creates as much as 9 months of capacity that we used to dedicate to tax compliance. Now we can focus that capacity on more valued things, things that your clients care more about. I work for Intuit, so I'm an Intuit fan, but our goal here at Intuit is to create an AI, artificial intelligence driven expert platform. And what that really means is everything's in the cloud. There are ways to connect all of these applications to solve all the jobs as best as possible. Yes, there's still work that we have to do, but the goal is keep trying to automate everything. And the artificial intelligence will give you insights as an expert, give you recommendations to share with your clients. We'll give you some pointers. You're the expert. You know your client. You know what their goals are. You know if this tax strategy or this business recommendation actually makes sense for them, and then how to optimize that. You're the expert. But it lifts you to a level of much higher value than just doing a lot of data input, doing a lot of compliance work, delivering the same government report that every other tax shop in the world is going to deliver. It helps you differentiate your services. It helps you really stand out and really create that practice of your dreams. So that's our strategy here at Intuit, is really to create that AI-driven expert platform to help showcase your financial acumen, your expertise with your clients.
Well, and if I could just add one more thing, David, too, because Jim sparked a couple of thoughts that are I think worth mentioning. You made a minor comment, Jim, right? Of, yeah, it's the technology will make a mistake, right? That's something I actually see a lot. People have extremely high expectations of technology, almost to the level of expecting it to be perfect at all times. And I think it's really important that we temper that expectation, because no technology is ever going to be perfect, and just like no human is ever going to be perfect. And so, and the technology is built by and used by humans. So there's going to be issues, mistakes, and so forth. And Jim talks about our strategy, for how we are developing our products, and speaking of AI technology, things like, one of the things that comes to mind and I don't want to get specifically focused on, scan and import technology, but it's come a long way. And one of the things that people don't realize that even we do is when, we do scan and import technology, when users go in and they make corrections to what the computer has read in, that actually signals back to our servers, and we learn, oh, that's coming in incorrectly. And the more people that are engaging with that, then it's teaching our systems back, hey, this is how you do it better. And then the technology gets better simply by engaging with it. And so, the thing I would encourage people is, keep working with the technology and keep working through the challenges that you're going to face, because it's a part of the growth process. It's part of the journey for everyone, including you and your firm, and how that all impacts you specifically.
Yep. Great. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And you all just kind of almost have my questions in front of you, the way you transition from one to the other. So John, coming back to you, just can each of you, we'll start with John, but then Jim and Jason, share some of the tools that your respective companies are providing to help them firms make this transition.
Sure, thanks, David. Love the dialogue so far. Just throwing that out there. It's always good to hear other people, their point of views and how they see things. And we all see a lot of different accounting firms, and so being able to bring those best practices and understandings through this is really valuable. Pacific Accounting and Business Services has been around for about 14 years, and we've got a subsidiary called PathQuest that is software that's developed by accountants for accountants. The first thing that, when we talk about tools, I'll just kind of throw out there that the white label service that we provide on tax and accounting provides that bridge to help people with the manpower issue, right? And then on top of that, we've got PathQuest Business Intelligence, which is a reporting and an analytics tool that allows accountants to really focus around the accounting side and being able to look at easy to maneuver dashboards and so on and so forth, as well as predictive analytics. It's that future looking, right? It's a jumping off point where we've got performance improvement, where it will automatically, like kind of what Jason was saying, it's going to go through and pull out all the variances. So it gives you that starting point to have those conversations with your customers. And then along with that, we have something called PathQuest Accounts Payable, which allows you to, as an accounting channel, allows you to look at a different revenue stream and automates a lot of that process also. So those are some tools that PABS and PathQuest, that's our subsidiary that operates our software side of the business.
Nice, thank you. Jim or Jason, you want to go through some of the tools that Intuit is offering?
Go ahead, Jason. You start.
I'm probably going to end up stealing all your thunder, Jim. So here's what I'll say. Look at technology as primarily a means for automation and to help you draw out data insights. And I focus first on automation. And one of the things that I, shameless plugging here, obviously I'm, coming from Intuit's perspective here, but I mean, the reality is that, there's a massive amount of, business owners using QuickBooks to manage their financials and do their regular accounting, right? Majority of firms have a pretty good percentage of clients on QuickBooks Online. And I'm even hearing many firms, especially mid to large size firms, they're just pushing all clients. So you're going to QuickBooks Online. We're not maintaining 7 years of QuickBooks Desktop on our servers anymore. We're not maintaining a bunch of different workflows. We are standardizing. Everyone's going on QuickBooks Online. We'll work with you through the process. Once you do that, then what firms are doing is looking at their tax software and automating the bridge from books to tax is one of the biggest things that we've spent a lot of time focusing on over the last, 10, 15 years, Jim? And so what a lot of firms are doing is even dual using. So as they move the transition, you've got your tax software that you're in love with, right? Doesn't matter what that is. But our ProConnect Tax product, our ProConnect Tax Online product, has a direct seamless integration built with QuickBooks Online. I mean, it's click a button and the tax return's pretty much done. It's obviously there's going to be things that are, if they're not in QuickBooks, you got to add them in. But I'm seeing a lot of firms just take just their QuickBooks Online clients and use our ProConnect tax product to take advantage of that automation. And then we just launched a new product that I'm going to let Jim tell you about that takes that to the next level.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Jason. Nice tee up there. So yes, QuickBooks to ProConnect Tax, literally your returns are ready to go in minutes. And what I'm most excited about is we take that same tax return information from your businesses, from your business owners, and we move that over to a whole new application called Intuit Tax Advisor, which is a framework for you to deliver tax advisory services for your clients. It focuses on, similar to traditional tax planners, it focuses on taking last year's information and creating that tax projection, but then also recommending tax strategies and quantifying the value of those tax savings for each of your clients. And then what we've heard from customers is about half of you don't even provide a deliverable for this tax planning experience today because the deliverables are so horrible. And so we've got a nice, beautiful, colorful, with your logo, your message on it, report that makes for a very nice, simple deliverable to clients with client education, quantifying and showcasing your recommendations and your values. And this is really our first foray into delivering fully automated advisory service applications for you. So we're starting in income tax because that's where the biggest ROI is. You have a slam dunk with this one. On average, firms with their first tax plan they're delivering to clients are showing an average of about $21,000 in tax savings. And what used to take 2.3 hours to create that first plan, they're now doing in about 22 minutes. So tremendous productivity savings. Again, this is a first iteration. We have about 30 standardized strategies in there today that you can personalize. You can add your own custom strategies, but we are just getting started and we'll add more. But even more important, this is the first foray into advisory across our platform, and sort of the framework is there so that we can begin to help you deliver advisory in a lot more areas. So we're super excited about it. You can always reach out to Jason, myself, or Intuit to get a little more information about that. We have lots of other platform offerings. And again, one of the things that Intuit's excited about is we're an open platform. So we want to try and help you solve your biggest problems, things like payroll, payroll benefits, access to capital for your clients, sales tax compliance, income tax, all those things. But if we don't do it best, hey, plug in somebody else who does it better than we do. And that way you've got the value of that integrated platform all the way from your client transactions, all the way through accounting, tax, and now through the advisory services, all in one place in one seamless platform.
Thank you all. We do have some questions coming in, so want to get at least one or two of those out. John, we'll start this one back with you. You know, what are some of the talents and skills needed from the staff, and how is that changing as we look into the future?
That's a great question, David, and I'd love to use a real life example. We had a accounting firm. She's a pretty strong influencer out in the accountant world, Liz Scott, and she had a bookkeeper, a CPA, and then I've got 6 grown kids, so I'll call it a millennial with an accounting degree. How's that? Each one of them was looking for something different, right? And they all have different skill sets. And we launched PathQuest Business Intelligence with them as an example. And the cool thing that came out of each one of those is the bookkeeper had a very specific set of needs that they wanted. They just wanted to be able to produce the financials as quickly as possible. And with PathQuest Business Intelligence, they were able to do that. And the surveys we found were on average of 3 to 4 hours a month to do that. And this allowed them to do it in like Jim said, savings of productivity. The skills she needed, and she was like, well, I don't know how to have conversations on advisory services. And what the feedback was, remove the word advisory, right? Because it sometimes becomes an impediment to having those conversations. And then with the productivity improvements where they showed the variances in the P&L, that's a great starting off point. So have a conversation about that. And the feedback to the bookkeeper was, look, at the end of the day, you have a great relationship with that small business owner because you're constantly chasing things down. Hey, where's your monthly, statements for this, or what was the check for that, or you build a rapport. Now you can start having some conversations, and it's a great starting off point. With the millennial, as an example, they're very tech focused, very tech savvy, and we gave them a homework assignment, and they said go load up a bunch of the companies and add them to the console. Overnight, they put on 20 companies because it was that easy, as an example. So the mindset was, I want to do things quickly and really get those. The CPA really was focused around, look, I've been doing this for 20 something years. As we all know, the personality is a little bit risk averse. Hey, I don't want to change a lot. And it was around, really, where do I start with this thing? I've looked at a bunch of different technologies, a bunch of business intelligence tools. Where do I really start? And I think that the key around that is really teaching them how to have conversations with the clients, and they all have that skill set. And I think as we started introducing something called, instead of calling them lead accountants, lead bookkeepers, and so on and so forth, it's really about client relationships, right? It's about how do you have a relationship with that client at a different level and have a conversation that starts talking about future looking items versus always looking in the rearview mirror. And so, it was an interesting journey seeing that, because those kind of hit on all three types of, I'll call it jobs that are in an accounting firm. And it really, each one of them had different needs and skills, and they all brought different skills to the table. And it's about how do you help them through that change process and really allowing them to make that change and that, that aha moment that says, yeah, I don't need to be, the bookkeeper was a little bit reluctant on technology, not that we've ever seen that before, a little bit adverse on, hey, technology may be taking my job away. No, it really enhances your job and helps you do it better, quicker, and faster, and allows you to have a different level of conversation with your customers that really adds value to what they're doing and trying to do, which is their livelihood.
One of my first articles that I wrote, John, was titled, Dear Tax and Accounting Professionals, technology is not taking your job away. And so you made me think about that, because that's exactly what it does, is it automates tasks, not whole jobs. And that enables you to level up. And what you just described is strategic thinking. I think that's the number one skill that people are having trouble because that's a hard thing. Like, I've spent my entire career developing my strategic capabilities, and I'm still, plenty of room to grow. And that's a much longer journey, and it's a little more ambiguous from a skill set perspective, because you can't put a pin in it and say, I've mastered this. It's continually evolving. But that's the big thing. I totally jumped in out of turn. I don't know if you're going to call on me next, but John totally inspired me with everything he was saying. He's dead on right. The first thing that I think people should focus on is leveling up their strategic thinking capabilities. Because I talk to business owners of firms too, and they just say, I'm on my hamster wheel every day. I'm doing my thing every day in my myopically focused world, and my accountant, if I have the right one with the right skills and capabilities, which is those strategic thinking capabilities, can pull me off of that hamster wheel and say, hey, let's look at the whole picture here. And just taking that different perspective creates a different kind of conversation. And then also thinking forward looking and proactive versus the way we've always been reactive.
Yeah. All great points. And Jason, we're going to leave it with you. And I can't believe our time is almost up here. It's just kind of flown by. If each of you could kind of just take a minute or two and kind of wrap up and add anything that, as you think about this topic, that you haven't really been able to convey so far. So we'll start with Jason, then Jim, and we'll wrap up with you, John.
I appreciate that. I don't think I have much more to add. I mean, there's so many problems that we're facing. There's so many different trends at play. There's a lot going on. It's easy to get overwhelmed. So I think what I will do is just reinforce the point I made earlier. Start somewhere. Start with one client and move forward from there. And it's one step at a time. Don't try to look at everything that needs to happen. Just start heading in that direction, and you'll find that you make faster progress than you were afraid you were not going to.
Jim?
Yeah, totally agree. Launch and learn, practice on your best client, your favorite client, your business owner that's making money today and paying too much tax. There's a great place to start. Update that service offering from traditional business models to more that bundled services. That'll help you bifurcate your compliance and your advisory services. Huge thing to bifurcate those and be able to get value from those. We've got client communications if you want to update your service offering with your clients. We have a path to advisory that was written by our tax counsel and has a lot of good best practices. So not saying exactly here's what to do, but giving you several options in each area around menu of services, client communications, your technology. There's more, I don't know, there's more stuff in there, but all those different areas and some best practices that you can pull out from that align with your practice. So lots of good resources. By the way, all those educational resources are free. Really encourage you to take advantage of those. But I think, like everybody else said, it's a launch and learn. Take that first step. And you know, we are here cheering for you and want to support you in your journey.
Yeah, thank you. John, bring us home.
You know, I'm a simple kind of a guy. I'm going to, play off exactly what Jason and Jim just said. You know, procrastination is not the thing to be focused on, right? And there's an old adage that analysis by paralysis, and it's about taking that first step, doing that first thing. There, over the last 20-something years, there is so much a wealth of knowledge out there on how to blueprints. I mean, look, you could pick up a phone and call somebody in your network that's a CPA or an accounting firm or a tax firm that has already made the journey, and just pick up the phone and invest an hour to have a conversation with them. Go out and look at all the free resources that are out there. It's about taking that first step, choose one customer and go and do it, and launch, learn, and tune, like Jim was talking about. At the end of the day, take the action, right? That inability to not take that action is really what's stifling a lot of firms that are out there today. Just go do it. I guess use the Nike emblem, just do it, right? Just go out there and do that, right? And there's a lot of successful firms out there that have made that transition, that are well down the journey, that would be happy to share what it was like, that first customer, that first time of doing it. It's scary. It's really scary, but in life, we have the FUD factor, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I'm an old Dale Carnegie guy, and stepping out of your comfort zone into your uncomfortable zone is your learning zone. And that's where you really start making that change in your firm, and allows you to really get the firm to where you want to be around advisory. So I guess that's what I believe with.
All right. Thank you all. Excellent points across the board. I know there are a bunch of questions that we didn't get to, but like we said in the beginning, we'll respond to those afterwards. And we appreciate everyone's attendance today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you.